Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Change Your Mind podcast. I'm your host, Chris Ashley, and I'm really, really excited. I have an awesome guest today. Her name is Sara Rae, and I can't wait to get into this conversation with her. So, Sara is a manifesting coach who teaches mystical women to manifest on purpose by shattering their manifesting ceiling. She is also an author, a moon astrologer, a crystal Reiki master, a tarot reader, and a gifted psychic medium who loves to bring the silly lightheartedness to spirituality. And I can't wait to hear some of that silly lightheartedness today. So welcome, Sara. I'm glad to have you.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Yes, I think I'm very funny. So yeah, I hope you get some of it.
And that's the first thing about being funny, right? Being
Yes,
yourself is funny and being able to
absolutely.
laugh at yourself, right?
At least one person in the world has to think it, and it's me. So there's that.
Yeah. And so many people take spirituality so seriously. Like
Yes.
it's spirituality, but it's also spirituality, right?
Well, yeah, and exactly. And I've just discovered that spirit has a sense of humor. So if God can be funny, why can't I,
Totally,
So
because we're all pieces of source anyway, right?
absolutely.
Cool. So today we're gonna. You do a lot, and you just sent me your bio right when we jumped on, and I was like, oh, I didn't even know that you were a medium and a tarot reader. So we
Hmm.
might get into some of that, but what I really wanted to talk about was Reiki and crystals today, because I'm such a big fan of Reiki, and I'll talk a little bit about my experience with it later on, but. I was wondering if we could just start off by you explaining to our listeners what Reiki is and kind of demystifying the whole thing a little bit.
Absolutely. This is what I do best is demystifying what Reiki is. So Reiki is, very simply put, universal life force energy. It is a form of energy healing in which the practitioner channels the universal life force energy directly from source itself through their body and their chakras into the body of the recipient. And the recipient can literally be anything. But when it's a person or a plant or an animal, that triggers the flow of that recipient's own life force energy, which results in healing and restoring balance within their whole body and their whole energy blueprint system. So, really, what Reiki is just a form of energy healing that is meant to trigger your own natural healing abilities. So, yeah, very simply put, in a really tiny nutshell, that is what Reiki is.
So it's almost like the Reiki healer is a channel, and the client or the person being healed is actually like pulling the Reiki through you. Do I have that right?
Yes, through you is a really important distinction, not from you, if that makes sense. So yes, the practitioner is the open channel pulling directly from source, and it flows through me to you. And yes, the recipient is they might actively be trying to visualize it flowing into their body. They might not, regardless, it's going where it needs to go. And it's just an open flow. So kind of picture the practitioner as the funnel. And the water pours into the funnel and it's like going a lot, and then it slowly trickles out at the bottom. That's
Mm.
basically what's happening with Reiki.
I love that visualization. So how do you feel as a practitioner when you're giving Reiki to someone? Can you
Oh,
feel that flow?
oh my gosh, yes. This is something I wanted to tell you because you mentioned something right about your own Reiki experience right before we hit record. So when I channel Reiki, whether it's for a group of people, which I do on a regular basis, or for a singular person, I am also receiving healing
Mm.
as it's coming through me. So very similar to how the funnel is getting wet when you're doing that visualization, you're also receiving Reiki as it flows. So when I'm doing Reiki, I personally, my skin tends to get pretty itchy. Like that's like my physical reaction to it. But other than that, it just feels like bliss. It feels very light. I can feel intuitively where it needs to go in my own body. That's how I kind of perceive Reiki. I don't do this much anymore, but I would also sometimes use like a prop, like a stuffed bear. It was specifically an angel bear that had angel wings on the back of it. And I would kind of use that as like my surrogate to tap into the energies of where things need to go. So for me, when I channel Reiki, it feels very, and the word fluffy is coming to my mind, but that doesn't really have the tone that I want it to have. Like just kind of really angelic, really light, kind of buoyant
Sounds
in a
like a
way.
cloud.
Yeah, yeah, like a cloud. Yeah. like what you want a cloud to be when you imagine like laying on top of a cloud.
Totally. Just that fluffy, cottony, like you can wrap
Yeah.
yourself up in it.
Yeah, that's how I feel it. But a lot of people do kind of feel it as tingles as well. It's really common. Heat is probably the next most common one. Most people feel Reiki is heat. I have one client who's like a natural healer. I haven't even attuned her to Reiki, and she already is like a natural healer. She gets very sweaty palms. So all of these things are very common. Sweat is very common too, like body sweat. I think it just depends on your own energy blueprint and how you react to energies and how you perceive what Reiki feels like. But I think generally speaking, most people tend to feel it as heat, as tingles, as kind of like soft and gentle and flowy.
And that goes for the person receiving it too, right?
Oh,
The
yeah.
person receiving it has all these kind of sensations.
For sure.
Yeah, I was telling Sarah before we jumped on that I guess you call it attuned. I've gotten the level 1, and I've only ever done it on my husband and my dog. But it's interesting because you can feel, like, the way I was taught to do it is I start at my husband's feet and kind of like go up his chakras, and you can feel when it pulls towards more of a certain chakra, right? It's like, it's like their body's like, this is where I need it, right?
Yeah.
It's so fascinating.
Absolutely. And that's what Reiki does, that it goes where it's needed. Always.
Yeah.
So even if you're just saying, I'm just channeling Reiki, you don't even necessarily need to place your attention anywhere. And it just kind of naturally goes where it's needed, which is such a beautiful way to heal. Like you could probably say it's like the easiest way, like in air quotes, easiest way to receive healing, because it just naturally understands what it needs to do, because it's God source, it's God energy.
Yeah. So for someone who's never had a Reiki session, and they might be like intimidated or scared by it, what does it feel like as if someone was going to come get Reiki from you? What is the process? Do you put your hands on them? How do they feel? Like, how do they feel after? How long does it last? Just to, again, demystify this whole thing.
Yeah, great questions. So I would say like 90% of my sessions are done remote, maybe even more than that. So when we do remote sessions, I like to kind of just take a moment and set the intention with the client. Right. And I like to say, so what brought you here? Why, what hurts? Are there any areas of the body? We kind of just have a little bit of a coaching time first, before we start the healing. And then once they're ready, when they feel comfortable, sometimes people lay down. Most of the time they choose to sit up, but they can go either way. And I just kind of do what I need to do. I personally like to start at the crown chakra. I know a lot of people do like to start at the foot chakra or the grounding chakras as well. But I personally like to start with opening up the crown, and I kind of guide them through like a simple meditation, which is pure channeled. Like none of that is pre-set, besides like this one little opening prayer / chant, I guess you could say, that I do to set myself up for channeling Reiki well. Most people just kind of feel relaxed. It's like a guided meditation, and then they might start feeling sensations. And depending on the person, I might talk to them while we're healing. It might be basically a personal guided meditation the whole time, where I'm talking to you the whole time, or it might be relatively silent the whole time. It might be a little bit of piping up here and there. It really just depends on what the person needs most in that moment. I would say most of the time they're not completely silent, but those ones are always really powerful when they are. And I would also say most of the times I will give them silent time as well. So it's really just a nice, personalized, guided meditation that involves healing as well. So people, if they're afraid of what they might experience, just know that Reiki never hurts, and it's impossible for Reiki to do harm. Like there are other not necessarily alternative healing modalities, but there are other healthcare practices that you can potentially overdose on, or they can become harmful. You can have too much of it. I literally think you can never have too much Reiki. I think that's one thing in this world that you can never have too much of. Same with love. And Reiki is just love energy. So you can never have too much. You can never channel it wrong. You can never be harmed by it in any way. So just know that if you are a little intimidated, but also know that Reiki does kind of have a tendency to open up the can of worms that's inside of you. You kind of, we were on my podcast, we were just talking about the dark night of the soul. Like Reiki may trigger some unpleasant feelings that you have to work through. And that's the whole point. That's why we do Reiki. So I think people are intuitively more intimidated by Reiki because they understand on a soul level that it's going to propel them into a transformative state that not everyone might be ready for.
That's really interesting. I just want to pipe in there and say, to me, I always used to get massages as a way to relax when I was younger until I discovered Reiki. And I leave as like a puddle. Like I'm so relaxed every time. But so it's really interesting that you said it can trigger some stuff. So I said earlier, I've given it to my husband and my dog, and I only gave it to my dog once. And yeah, I gave it to my dog once and I did it to her. And then she started like throwing up, and it was the craziest thing. She threw up like 4 times in a row right after. And I was like, holy shit. Like, oh my God. Like, I felt so terrible. I was like, what did I do? Did I mess up her energy? Because I had just kind of learned it. And I was like, am I messing with something that I shouldn't be? Like, and then I was talking to all my more spiritual friends about it, and they're like, no, you helped her release something. Like, what a gift. Like, there was something she had to purge. And, but it kind of freaked me out. But I love that you said that it can bring up stuff like that, because and I don't mean to like scare anyone, because like you said, like Reiki can never hurt you. But I think in that moment, she had to release something. And it was just the trippiest, craziest experience, because I was like, whoa, this is real. Like, this isn't some like woo woo thing. Like, this is like real energy. And oh my gosh, my hands just did that, you know?
Yeah, it's amazing to think about. I have never had a human react in that way, but I've heard stories where people, they might experience diarrhea like things after Reiki, or they might have an upset stomach, or they might experience a migraine. They might have some physical reactions afterwards. I had another client who was very apprehensive about getting Reiki at all. She just wanted coaching. She's like, I don't even want energy healing. And I was like, and I kind of probed that a little bit. Turns out that she had experienced something very similar, where she didn't throw up or anything, but she got physically very ill, and that happened multiple times. But that, yeah, like you said, that's exactly what it's meant to do. You're meant to purge, and Reiki has a way of stirring up this energy, that magic energy within you, because we have it within us already. Because Reiki proves that quantum physics is real. Reiki is just the energy of everything. So when it gets stuck or stagnant, and then we give it more of it and it becomes unstuck or stagnant, there's going to be a reaction. There's going to be a ripple effect in the universe, because Reiki is everything and everything is Reiki.
Yeah, it's almost like things that have been stuck for a long time, like shake loose and bubble up to the surface a little bit, right?
That's
I say that
exactly
about
what
yoga
happens.
all the time too, because that's kind of moving energy in a way as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm super curious. In your bio that I just read to everyone, it says you're a crystal Reiki master. And I've never heard of someone incorporating crystals with Reiki, and I want to get into that. But I feel like first, maybe you should just give a little bit of info on crystals to everyone, because there's probably some listeners out there who are like, "Oh yeah, those are just rocks. Like, what's the big deal?" You know, I know like pink quartz is unconditional love, but if you could, and I know that's kind of a big question, but if you could kind of give us a little simple explanation of, you know, what crystals are, why do you use them, why are they so important? And then we can get into how you incorporate them into the Reiki.
Yeah, I love rocks.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
on a technical term, a lot of crystals are technically considered rocks, but we won't go into terminology today. But yes, what makes a crystal is its molecular structure. The molecules are stacked perfectly, air quotes, in such a way that they're arranged in a really symmetrical and clear, distinct pattern, unlike anything else in the universe. Nothing that we can make as a mankind, and nothing else that really grows on Earth other than crystals. So their molecules are stacked just so. And because everything is energy, that certain stacking of the molecules has a specific resonance, which gives each crystal its specific energy, so to speak. And a lot of the crystals that are of the same hues or the same shapes or anything like that, where similarities, they all tend to have similar molecular structures, which is why some crystals resonate with certain energies and work together well, and others resonate in different energies. And everyone kind of, same with Reiki, everyone kind of interprets the energy a little bit differently. But for the most part, there are universal things that we believe to certain crystals to be. Like you just mentioned, rose quartz. Rose quartz absolutely is the stone of unconditional love, but rhodonite is also the stone of unconditional love, which is a type of quartz. It has black and pink in it, but it also has a layer of protection, because its molecular structure is a little different than the rose quartz. So you can kind of see how the crystals tend to be a little bit more fine-tuned or specific in their energies. So I like to combine crystals with Reiki, because Reiki is like the background. Reiki is like when you sit down to do a painting and you do the undercoat, you tone the canvas in some way with some color. That is what Reiki is. And then when you take out your detail brushes and you start painting the actual picture, that is what the crystals are doing. So Reiki is your blanket healing. It is a universal healing for everything. It goes where it's needed. It's very alive in its own sense, where it does what it needs to do. And crystals are very alive in their own way, where they're helping you to adopt a very specific energy in your energy field, which is called entrainment. That process of crystals changing your energy to match theirs is called entrainment. And when that happens, you have the opportunity on a subconscious level to adopt that energy and begin to promote it outwards, which helps change your energy blueprint, which changes what you're manifesting, which changes the ailments that you're dealing with and changes everything. So I hope that answered your question. I don't want to get too technical, but that's essentially what's going on here, is that the crystals have a very specific molecular structure that resonates with certain energies. And then when we combine that with Reiki, we're basically having a holistic approach to what we're doing, the healing modalities that we're doing.
I think that's the most beautiful definition of a crystal I've ever heard. And it's, and I loved, and I've never actually heard anyone explain how you use their energy in that way. So that was really, I just learned a lot. So thank you.
Good.
That was super informative. Yeah. So it's more like, rather than you using the crystal's energy, it's more like the crystal pulling you up to its frequency. Did I understand?
That's exactly right. Yep. And that process is called entrainment.
So are there some crystals that resonate with certain people more, or can you use any crystal with any person?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, can anyone be prescribed any drug? Technically, yes. But should anyone take any drug? Probably not. So I would say there are crystals that most people do really, really well in. Like you mentioned, rose quartz is probably one of the most famous ones, right? All the quartzes tend to be most beloved, like the clear quartz, amethyst, citrine. These are really popular crystals because they just are nice for most people. But I know plenty of people who are like, I cannot stand rose quartz. And they're not just because they're hipsters, but just because it just doesn't resonate with them. And that's totally fine. Like, I personally do not like carnelian. Carnelian is a bright orange crystal that just gives me stomach aches and just doesn't really resonate with me very well. So I don't use carnelian a whole lot. And that is that way with everybody. Everyone has preferences. Everyone has different energy blueprints, and everyone also has different goals in this life from a soul level, like different lessons they're working through. And some crystals might not be the most supportive choice for that particular person. But having all that being said, I also truly believe that nothing can come into your sphere that you're not a vibrational match for. So even though I personally don't really like carnelian, I mean, I know it exists. I have pieces of it. It's been in my sphere. I can be near it without bursting into flames. So it can still be in my energy space because it does serve me. But I just choose not to actively work with it because I feel like there are other ways to be good. So I hope that kind of makes sense. And I hope that answers your question.
It does. It's super interesting. So when you're using the crystals for Reiki, I was thinking like, oh, maybe you place them on the person's chakras, but you do so much work remotely. How do you utilize them? Do you have them around you? Is there any kind of ceremony? Do you program them? What is programming crystals?
Yes.
Give us
I
the
love
rundown.
that question. Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, when someone is with me in the room with me, then yes, I typically do place crystals on their body. And you also asked me earlier about hands-on. I don't think I addressed that. I personally don't, when my client is in the same room with me, I don't physically touch them. That's my personal preference. The way I was taught, actually, the master that taught me, she encouraged me to put my hands on them, but I just learned through trial and error that I prefer hands floating above. That is a little bit of a tangent. But yes, if I'm with my client, I will typically put crystals on their body if they are okay with it. Sometimes they like to place them themselves, totally fine by me. If I am doing remote, which I'm typically am doing, and with my group sessions too, when I do Reiki for groups, I will either take out my handy dandy flash dance bear, or an angel bear, where she's like a big stuffy, and I like place crystals on her, and I set the intention that this bear is representing this person. And, it just kind of acts as a surrogate that way. Sometimes I'll do that. Otherwise, I will just hold them in my hands and just offer them if I'm doing remote so they can see them. Sometimes I'll line them up in front of me. It's very intuitive how I work with them, but I find that most of the time I do tend to line them up in like a very straight way. And the lighter crystals that resonate with the higher chakras tend to be towards the top. And then the darker crystals that resonate with the lower chakras tend to be in the bottom. So while I don't think that's necessarily necessary to benefit from the healing energy of crystals, I personally do that because I feel like that is what maximizes their energies. So there's all different kinds of levels you can do. You can just have the crystal in your house and just benefit from it that way. You can just be really simple, or you can be super complex. Like you mentioned programming crystals, where if I say, I want this particular piece of quartz to do this specific thing for whomever I offer it to, I can do that if I want to get really, really specific. So yes, to answer your question, yes, I do program crystals. It's very easy to do that. If you want to learn how to do that, we can certainly talk about that. It's not necessary, but I like to do that with very specific pieces in my healing toolbox so that I know when I reach for this crystal, this is going to help me cut cords. For example, I have a specific crystal that I use to cut cords because I programmed it for that to be its job. So yeah, I hope that's answering your questions. I don't mean to go off on tangents or anything.
No, I love your. So when you do program them, do you do that through meditation? How does that work?
Yeah, through meditation. I have also like written down the intention or the program and then put the crystal on top of it over a full moon. That's one way to program a crystal. One way that I normally do, if it's not a full moon, I will take the crystal in my hand and I will like formulate the intention or the program in my brain, in my third eye chakra. And I kind of visualize it being as like a little like orb. And I visualize it leaving my chakra into the crystal and like getting absorbed by the crystal, getting into those molecules in every nook and cranny. And I be sure to say that let it be there until I intentionally remove it to make sure that it stays there. Because I feel like if you don't do that, eventually it just kind of wears away. That's how I feel anyway. So
I was just gonna ask you what wears away.
Yeah, I think I personally believe they do. Again, this is how we interpret energy. So maybe somebody else feels differently, but that's just part of my trial and error that I've discovered over the last, I don't even know how long, decade plus of working with crystals.
So do you feel like crystals are alive?
Oh yeah, I do.
Like they're living beings?
I really do.
Yeah.
I feel like they're on the same level as plants, alive in that sort of way.
Yeah.
Where you can't necessarily deny that a plant is living, and it's sentient, and we know that it has consciousness, but it's not 3D, so it doesn't have an ego. So it doesn't think in the way that we do, but it is alive and sentient and can feel things.
Yeah. That's cool. I like that. I've heard a lot of people say that before.
Yeah, I personally think they are alive for sure.
Also, I have to say your little stuffed bear with the wings has to be like, get like the best vibes out of like any stuffed animal ever. Like you practice on it. It's a surrogate for everyone else.
Yep. And it has wings on the back of it. And I've had it since I was a girl. So it's been with me for a long time.
That's really cute. Okay. So I know we were just going to talk about Reiki and crystals, but then you said, I learned that you're a tarot reader. I learned you're a medium. Do you ever incorporate all of these things together? Or, do you find that there's a powerful way that they all kind of intersect? And
yeah.
I love tarot. So,
oh yeah, me too. I love tarot. Yes, I truly think that they all find a way to converge perfectly. Again, it took me many years to figure this out. So if you're kind of in that position where you have a lot of interests, they will all come together eventually. It took me a couple years to figure it out. But yes, so typically when I have a private session with a client, my sessions are 75 minutes long. So we have plenty of time to do coaching and we talk things out. And that's when we pull the cards and we get some insight and all that good stuff. And then we use those cards and whatever we've been talking about, the coaching aspect, to kind of inform the healing part afterwards. And some clients only want or need like a handful of minutes for silent, what I refer to as silent Reiki at the end of their sessions, like usually like last 15 minutes or so. Sometimes they just want to talk the whole time. So I'll like channel Reiki like on the side, so to speak, while we are talking the whole time. So it's just kind of continuously flowing. Other people don't want to talk at all and they just want 75 minutes of crystal Reiki, and that's totally fine too. So I think it does depend on the person, on the client, but most of my sessions do kind of involve all of them. They involve the tarot readings, which always involves mediumship, which always involves tapping into spirit and seeing what messages comes through. That always involves coaching as well, which there's a certain level of mediumship with coaching as well. Like a spirit or a spirit guide really wants me to tell them something, it will come up. And then they have the opportunity to choose if they want to do crystal Reiki or continue to coach or whatever. Like my sessions are always meant to be what they need to be, but it usually does include all the modalities in one.
It sounds like your sessions are so fun, and I love how intuitive you must need to be in order to really read your client and what they need. And I realized as you were just talking that I didn't even ask you how you got started in all this. So I'd love to hear your journey. And did you always, I mean, especially with the mediumship, like, did you always kind of have that gift, or is it something you developed? And yeah, give us your story.
For sure. I appreciate the opportunity. I've always been a medium for sure. And where God has always been present in my life. We went to a Lutheran church growing up. I got myself baptized in a Catholic church when I was 16 or 17. God's always been there for me. But then eventually when I moved to college, I had a girlfriend who lived in an apartment downtown above a yoga studio. And across the street from the yoga studio was this adorable little crystal shop that unfortunately isn't open anymore. But we used to go in there all the time because she lived right there, and it was like all our yoga was there and the crystals were there. We loved it all the time. I just became freaking obsessed, and I could not stop learning enough. Very similar to your experience when you started kind of experiencing the spirituality aspects of it. So there was never like a specific moment in which I realized that I'm going through a spiritual awakening. It was all very gradual. God and mediumship has always been with me, but crystals specifically didn't show up in my life until I was 18-ish or so. And then Reiki didn't show up until a couple years later. I don't really know how Reiki found me. It just kind of all of a sudden was there. I'm sure you can relate, and people listening, just sometimes it just happens like that. So with experimentation, I realized I could combine crystals with Reiki. I actually became a certified crystal healer many years before I became a Reiki master. And I was doing just regular crystal healings, regular air quotes, healings for people up until that point. When I started to incorporate Reiki more, I just realized that they're just kind of meant to be together. And they're really just two different ways of channeling healing energy. So that's kind of been up until now. The last several years have been bringing those two things together. And mediumship was something that I definitely was born with. I think everyone was born with it to a certain extent. But I consciously worked on it around the time I started discovering Reiki, probably a little bit too. Up until then, it was just kind of like it is what it is sort of a thing. I knew I could develop it, but I wasn't quite there yet. So it just kind of all happened and unfolded in its own time. But I love being a medium. That's probably one of my greatest gifts. And I often don't lead with that because it just is who I am. And I forget that that's who I am. Like I forget it's not normal for other people to just like constantly be receiving messages from other people. So it's like just there always. If that makes sense.
I love that story, and I love how it all kind of found you and fell into place. So when you say you're a medium and you get messages from spirit, what does that look like? Can you turn it on and off? Is it people who have deceased? Is it just you can kind of read people in the room? Like what is it exactly?
All the above. Yeah.
Okay.
I will say it is a challenge for me personally to turn it on or off. That is not a skill that I have really honed very well, but also I haven't been in many situations where my energetic boundaries are being violated to the point where I need to like do a hard turn off. So I've been very fortunate in that regard. But when I receive messages, I am very cognizant, which means that they just kind of beam into my head. It's just like an inner knowing. And clairaudient is probably the main thing. I hear voices a lot. That's the main way I communicate with people, or not just people, I guess, just with spirit. It could be loved ones, could be guides, could be angels, all of that good stuff. It really depends on who I'm talking to. In my day-to-day life, like if I'm seeing people, that is probably when I do turn it off. When I'm not, like if I'm at the grocery store, I'm not really there to, deliver messages or anything. But if I'm in a situation, like a comfortable family situation, I can certainly see if people are coming up. Like that happens a lot. Like whenever we're hanging out with family, grandparents will come in, past animals will come, and all my family is very open and honest and believers. So they are all very happy to hear. I'm like, oh yeah, grandpa's right there. Grandpa Ed's right there, or whatever. So that's how I kind of perceive it. I hear it a lot and I know it a lot. I also get spirit chills a lot. What you might hear it called like spinal taps, where there's like a very specific type of shiver that goes down your spine. And it makes your hair stand up. I'm sure everyone's experienced something similar. It's not the same as like being cold, like goosebumps type of cold. There's what I call spirit chills. So those are probably all the main ways that I receive communication, especially from past loved ones.
That's such a gift. And I love that your family is so open and supportive. I feel like being in that nurturing environment probably helped nurture your gift, where so many other people are ashamed of it or afraid of it and kind of try to block it out.
Oh, absolutely. I was very fortunate in that regard that I never turned it off. It never got turned off. Like most people do experience like a period of time, however long it is, where they don't engage at all with their mediumship or even with their healing abilities. And then they just open up one day and it's like, I'm here, and it's stronger than ever. But I was very fortunate to never shut it down.
Yeah, that's really special.
Yeah.
And I think everyone has those abilities. It's just so many people aren't open to them, right? They're not tuned into it. They don't want anything to do with it, or they don't hone that muscle. I think that that's what humans are meant to be able to do, right? Like we only use like 10% of our brain. Like I think we're all have superhuman abilities. We just don't we don't acknowledge it. We don't use them. So they atrophy, right? So many kids are kind of just told to not use their imagination or to, grow up or whatever it is. And they lose those abilities, which is so sad.
It is. It is sad. And that's what I really want to avoid with my daughter too. And my niece as well is like super, super psychic. And all kids are psychic. Just like as you were saying, I think we all have natural human abilities. But depending on your own path, on your level of I don't want to say enlightenment, but your level of like a spiritual awareness might determine how easy it is for you to naturally tap into not only spirit, but also your own intuition. So it is something we can all do, just like we can all pick up running. We can all become weightlifters, right? We all have the physical abilities to do this, but some people are more naturally athletic than others, just like some people are more naturally open psychically than others. But it's a skill everyone can hone. Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that analogy a lot. So if someone wants to work with you, how can they find you? Do you have a website? Do you have social media?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing for giving me the opportunity to share where you can find me. So yes, my podcast is Spiritually Inspired. You can find it on any major podcast apps. We do manifesting, mindfulness, and magic on Fridays. And I really want to invite all your listeners to come and join a crystal Reiki session. I have donation-based Reiki every single week, multiple times a week in my free Facebook group. If you go to spirituallyinspired.co/free group, it'll take you right to Facebook. And every Monday morning, I go live to do like a weekly astrology forecast. It's basically a live podcast that I do that includes a guided Reiki meditation at the very end, which is very similar to what I was talking about earlier. We pull cards, we talk about astrology, we do some coaching, and then we do Reiki. It's like a mini session. And then I also do 30 minutes of just distant crystal Reiki multiple times a month that are completely free to join. So everything that we talked about today with the Reiki healing, with the crystal healing, with receiving guidance and pulling cards, all of this I'm doing on a regular basis. If you want to come check it out, definitely do. spirituallyinspired.co/free group for free Reiki on the internet.
That's amazing. Everyone needs to go take advantage of that right now. I'm going to take advantage of that. And it actually leads to my final question. Is there anything that you can do for just a few minutes, whether it's do like a quick reading or pull a couple cards or some sort of little guided meditation just to kind of leave people with today?
Yeah, I would love to do that. I have a crystal with me. I have hemamorphite.
Oh,
It's a
that's
light
great.
blue crystal. Yeah. I love this crystal. It's really good for the throat chakra. So if
Mm.
everyone would like to open up your throat chakra a little bit, I'm pretty good at packing a lot of Reiki punch in just a couple of minutes. So if you're driving or doing anything else, maybe come back to this a little bit. But yeah, let's do it if you don't mind. So I invite you all to just sit in a place that's comfortable and drop into your body. Lower your shoulders, shake it out if you need to, and find some stillness. Change me, divine beloved, into one who can give and receive freely, so that I may be a clear vessel for your light. Let all those near and far across space and time receive the healing and the guidance they need most now. If it is unneeded or unwanted, let it fall to the earth. And recite to yourself, I am open to receive. I am open to receive. And as we open up, our hemamorphite crystal gets introduced. Even if you can't see it, You can feel it. Quiet your mind. Be careful not to make any judgments about your experience now. With each breath in and out, your mind is settling a little bit more. You're opening up just a little bit more to receive. And now let's place awareness around your throat chakra, right over the neck. Imagine blue energy circling there, loving and open. And feel the hemomorphite crystal seep into your energy and contribute to its liveliness. And let us breathe in this energy for a minute. As we start coming back, you can wiggle fingers and toes and open eyes slowly. Even just a couple of minutes can shift your energy. And you can always come back to this little energetic burst of goodness whenever you need to cleanse and open up your throat. And so it is.
Thank you so much. I had goosebumps like running down my body the whole time. It was so powerful. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
you're
for
welcome.
that little gift for listeners.
You're welcome. I
love
love doing quick bursts like that. It's like one of my favorite things to do because I really think it opens people's minds up to not only how accessible Reiki is, but what's possible. Like if you sit down for a 75-minute session after just 3 minutes of like, whoa, like imagine how powerful a full session would be.
Yeah. And again, everyone needs to go take advantage. I can't believe how many free offerings you have. Everyone go check out Sarah's website. And I'm going to have the links in the show notes so you can find them there. And thank you so much again. And thank you everyone for listening. Again, I'm Chris. Go check out my book, Change Your Mind to Change Your Reality. Follow me on social media at Change Your Mind with Chris. Follow Sarah. And thank you all so much. Have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thank you for having me, Chris.